three things you say on your website, which is really indicative, I think, of the way you work, and it's walking, watching, and reacting. Walking, by looking at your work, you wander an awful lot.
Yeah, you have to, wonder. It's the art of walking without a destination in mind. You know, you're not walking to get somewhere. It's a lost art of walking to nowhere. Yeah. And what you want to do is you literally just empty your mind and walk. There's nothing to it. There's no secret to it. There's no trick. Just walking without wanting to go anywhere. And you'd be amazed what you find, you know. Because there's paths all over the place, you know. They're called desire lines. And get these desire lines. You know, when you see a footpath and there's a quicker way to get somewhere else, and people walk along these places, and these paths get sort of worn in. And, you know, sheep and animals do a similar sort of thing. So there's these little trails that just lead off here and lead off there. And I just think, you know, there's no real reason I'll choose left or choose right. I'm just going to go and do it. And they'd be amazed, absolutely amazed what you stumble across. Absolutely amazed. And if you go off-piste or go to places where people aren't generally going to go, that's where I think that's where the interesting photographs start to happen. Especially if you're in the frame of mind, if you've got an empty mind, you are just literally reacting to what you're seeing in front of you. And then you kind of work out later why you've done it. You know, it'll all be in there, all wanting to come out. So I just literally walk and see where it takes me. And it's simple as that. There's no, like I said, there's no trick. But, you know, I think like as soon as you sort of predetermine a destination, you go, I'm going to go out for 3 hours today. I'm going to go to this place. I'm going to photograph this place, and I'm going to walk the same way back. You've almost set yourself up to fail straight away. You know, there's no, you're not going to be. You've got an idea in your head, and I don't want an idea. I want to feel it. I want whatever's in me to sort of come out in the place I'm photographing. So it should be like a self-portrait. You know, when you make a landscape photograph, it should be you looking at the landscape, and then you photographing whatever bounces back. You know, that's how I sort of see it behind you. Because the landscape's been moulded and manipulated by mankind for eons, and we think of something as a natural landscape when it blatantly isn't. You know, the hand of man has changed it completely, and it'll continue to do so and so forth. But I try and think about the people who have moulded the landscape, and I try and imagine, when I make a photograph, I try and imagine them, all these people are long dead, you know, that sort of stood behind me, watching me. And I use this phrase occasionally. It's like the dead sing songs, and I'm trying to learn to listen to that. And you see the way they see the way they've done the landscape, made it into something different. But I like that fluidity, you know, that fluidity with the landscape, the way it changes. You know, in 60 odd years or 30 years or however long I live, it's a comfort to me to know that while I've gone, but the landscape will, you know, continue. It'll remain, and it'll keep changing and evolving, and especially in Britain, you know, we're a tiny little place with so much crammed into it, and then suddenly you there's no sort of great wilderness here. It's all the hand of man is evident everywhere. You know, up in Derbyshire, I don't live in Derbyshire, I live in Yorkshire, but it's a hop, skip and a jump over into Derbyshire. I mean, there's a lot of old stone circles, you know, and obviously you've got the farmland, the Light Peak, which is a limestone-based place, and the Dark Peak, which is a grit stone. And they're vastly different, but it just takes you minutes to cross into one and the other. But I like that... It's exactly how it should be. There should be a dark bit and there should be a light bit, you know. And whichever sort of mood you find, you know, it's amazing where you find yourself, and you realise you've walked somewhere, you know, and without sort of thinking about it, without overthinking it. You're not trying to get somewhere, but you almost go somewhere to match your mood without sort of realising it. And you find yourself, oh, I'm in a bad mood today, or a miserable mood, and I go to places where bad things have happened, or there's, you know, miserable looking places. You know, I mean, the weather plays a huge part as well, because it's such a, you know, as British, we're obsessed with the weather, are we not? It's all we talk about. but because it's so changeable, you know, that's I suppose that's why we're so obsessed with it, you know. But yeah, that's basically it.
It's really interesting. I just pick you up on a point you mentioned that the landscape almost becomes a self-portrait.
Yeah.
And the more I photograph, the more aware I am of that aspect of photography. That whenever I'm and what intrigues me about this about clearing the mind. Have you found yourself walking and not being clear enough your mind set in order to photograph?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's I think when you walk, you make sense of whatever's going on in your life at the time.
Well, yeah, that's another interesting aspect, because the thing is, there's a Latin phrase called solvitur ambulando, which just kind of loosely means everything is solved by walking.
Yeah, yeah.
And I kind of think that if you are in that wonderful state of being able to cleanse your mind of everything, that everything becomes more focused.
Of course, yeah. It's like dreaming when you're awake. You know, that's like you're walking along, and you can almost feel it. It's almost like a physical feeling. You every step you take, you're leaving something else, you know, leaving something behind. And every step forward you make, you're gaining something as well. So you're moving through. Yes. You're moving through, but you have to leave something. That's the trick, I suppose, is realizing that you have to leave something behind when you take something. You know, you're taking from the landscape, but you have to leave something of yourself behind as well. Right. You know, it should be a mirror. It should be and a window.
When you're out and you've photographed something, how hard do you work that little area you may have found? Do you spend a lot of time there, or are they half a dozen shots, or are they a couple of shots?
I don't make a lot of photographs when I'm in a place. Maybe it really does depend what I'm doing and the situation I sort of find myself in. If I like days sometimes when the wind is howling and the clouds part and there's a little bit of sunshine suddenly illuminates something. I like to work quickly. People always say, no, landscape photography, just use a tripod, slow down. So, rubbish, speed up. You know, I like to work quickly. So I make maybe 10 exposures, regardless of what I'm shooting on, digital or film. It doesn't that's inconsequential. I don't shoot a lot. I know when I've done it. You know, you get that, you straight away you realise, oh, I've done this, and I can put the camera away now. You know, I never do, but you know, I could if I wanted to. But because you never know what you're gonna bump into. But there's always a point. It becomes very intuitive, very natural sensation to realise that's exactly what I wanted. That's exactly but you don't realise it till you've done it. You know, it's only afterwards that you sort of you start to make sense of what you're sort of photographing. I was thinking about. I mean, I used to shoot a lot in quarries. Specifically because I was just amazed at the amount of stuff that had been removed, and there was something really perverse about being somewhere that you're not really supposed to be. I like that. I kind of like that. You know, I'm not advocating trespass or even though it's only a civil offence and cannot be. No criminal proceedings can be brought against you, but. Well, I think that's true. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, I think there's just something wonderful about those out of the way places, because in life in general we adhere to the rules and we live a certain way, and we're not terrible to other people, and you try and live as a decent life as you can. But when you go into a quarry or somewhere you're not really sort of supposed to be, it's like a last act of rebellion, you know, and there's not many of those left for me. You know, I'm sort of, you know, vastly approaching middle age, and I don't get to do that much anymore. So there's something like a childlike naughtiness to it almost, which I always quite enjoy. But aside from that sort of rather fleeting moment, you can stand on the lip of a quarry and look over it, and it's that decision whether to. Sometimes I decide to walk away because sometimes it just doesn't seem right to do. Yeah. And I used to go in a lot at night, and when you go into quarries at night, the place changes completely. It becomes much more sinister, much more strange, you know. And I'd go into these places. There'd be these huge rotting hulks of machinery. You'd smell them. You'd smell that sort of damp diesel before you'd see them, and you'd have a head torch on. So the head torch was, it's only picking out. It made it all the more scary because your night vision's affected by it. So you're only picking out sort of little bits. But I think that the act of scaring yourself as well, it makes you feel more alive. How often do you get scared? And you're kind of forcing yourself into these situations. But, I never spent too long in there. I'd make what I wanted to do. And then I think, I've spent too long here and I've pushed my luck and I'll get out,
Right. So when you're discovering these places on your walks, do they tell you, there's a series of, or do they not?
No, not specifically. The places don't inform the series. The projects I've made. It's almost that the locations don't matter. It's a much more insular thing within me. I can be anywhere. I start making a series without even thinking about making a series. It's just only after you've made. It's like playing. You have to sort of play with it a little bit, and you start making a body of work, and then you keep photographing and try not to overthink it. That's I think there's a devil in that. Of overthinking something, and once it's finished, or certainly towards the end, you begin to realise. I begin to realise why I've done it. I'd love to say I have a plan, and I go out and it's a noble plan, and I'll go out and photograph this specific. But I'm just not that together. I just can't work that way.
Yeah.
I photograph with my heart, not my head.
Yeah.
I suppose is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I was photographing yesterday. I went to a festival in Cardiff Castle yesterday, and it was it's very busy and lots of people. But trying to isolate yourself in those circumstances, I like that challenge. And being almost not there, but I'm there.
Yeah.
if you know what I mean. The camera is and so you're it's like hunting really, and you can't really talk to anybody, and they look at you in a very quirky way, and and you get that, and it's that thing of going to a quarry at night. I've never thought about that.
I highly recommend it.
But, okay.
I highly recommend it, just for the sheer oddness of it. Because there's nothing else I've done in my life that's been like it. I've done various things, as we all have in our youths and whatnot. You've pushed certain boundaries, and you've got away with it. And I like getting away with it.
So have you? I mean, pushing, being experimental in your work. I mean, we'll come to that a little later, but experimenting is really important aspect of your work.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, because I think. If you're prone to experimentation, I want to see what the world looks like using different things to capture it. Capture what I'm trying to sort of get across. I think a new technique or a new way of looking at things. You're constantly trying to evolve. I want to evolve. There's always something new to learn. If you're just shooting the same stuff in the same way, you're not doing yourself any favors or anybody else. I want to learn. That's what I want to do.
So where does that love of photography and experimenting come from?
I think when I was photography, there were always cameras in the house when I was a child. Always cameras. My father would go to house clearance auctions, so I'd come back with boxes of crap for £1, and there'd always be cameras in there, because. And so there was I think the first camera I ever got was it was like a 120 medium format thing. So the roll film, and I'd photograph my dinosaurs. I'd toy dinosaurs in the garden. I'd make dioramas and slightly ruined with the houses behind them. So they weren't. But there was always that. It was always that need to see how things looked photographed, if that makes sense. Yeah. So there was always something there. But I went to art college. Well, I was very lucky. I left school at 16 and went to art college, and straight away, from the constrictions of a school life to suddenly be thrown into a place where you're treated like an adult for the first time in your life, and you're encouraged to express yourself and experiment. and it was just literally that. It was just literally that, just that encouragement. Certain lecturers who were very, very instrumental in pushing me a certain way and guiding me, but without being overbearing about it. You know, it was a gentle coaxing process, and it took me a while to sort of come out myself. And the problem, I suppose, in photography, you never feel like you ever have enough time to finish. You know, there's always that's the trade-off, isn't it? You know, you're never going to finish. There's always something new to learn. So I think I want to cram as much as I can in every single facet I can do while I can, because there's going to be a day. I'm always very aware of this. There's going to be a day when I'm not going to be able to go into a quarry. I'll be too old, or I'll lose a leg, or whatever. You know, some terrible thing will befall me. But there's going to be a day. So I'm always extremely grateful that I can do this. I can go out. And it's remembering that as well while you're out in these places, remembering how lucky I am to be able to experience this and to photograph it.
Right. Do you draw? Do you paint?
I used to paint. I always drew as a child, you know, felt tips, crayons. You know, things in here have to in my head. You know, for the benefit of the listeners, I just touched my head. But things in my head have to come out. So they came down my arm. And if it's a pencil, a paintbrush, you know, papier-mâché, whatever, you know, there's that need to express yourself and to get something out. You know, I had a job, I had a terrible job in an office for some years, and it was boring, and I noticed that all day I would doodle, and so I had reams and reams of A4 paper with these doodles, these awful, you know, terrifying, really, looking back on anything. What was going on in my head? But it became, you know, I can't do that. I have to be able to express myself and try and understand the world. That's all I'm trying to do, and to be understood, because that's, as human beings, that's all we want to be. We want to be understood.
So making work that matters then.
If it matters to me, I mean, I'd be lying if I said I don't want people to look at it, but I do it. I do this if no one looked at it. Of course I would, you know, but I love the fact that people look at it, you know. I think it's raised to say, oh, I'm not bothered if people don't look at it. Of course I'm bothered, you know. A work's only ever completed when someone else looks at it, you know. When you've finished a project, that's when it becomes complete. When you've put it off out there, and people, and then it turns into something else, you know, complete. You have to let it go. You have to, like teenage child. You have to let this go. You have to go, fly, my beauties. You know, become something else, and people take it and run with it, and then make it their own, because they've only got their own minds to bring to bear on this, which is essentially a 2D flat representation of something I've seen. That's all it is, and they've, you know, there's no trick. It's you know, you've just got your own life and your own memories and your own opinions to bear upon this two-dimensional representation of something someone else has seen, something that you know, I think this is interesting enough to photograph, and I want to show you this is what I find interesting.
How far afield do you go in your work? I mean, you live in Yorkshire, you're near to the Dales, so do you wander far afield? Do you go to other countries, or do you go, or basically? I
am geographically. I'm somewhat constricted. You know, I have a young son I have to look after, so I am constricted in terms of my geographical location. I can only go a certain, unless, you know, like today I'm in Wales. And yesterday and last weekend I was in Scotland, you know. So I try and go as many places as time allows, you know. But like I said, the location it almost isn't important, you know. I think if you live in a certain area, you could spend a lot of time there and really, really, really get to grips with the place, and really understand the place, you know. And go back to the same place. I find myself revisiting an awful lot.
Yes, I was going to ask you that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how often do you? I mean, yes, revisiting is sometimes literally an eye opener. Yeah. It gives you, and even coming to somewhere from a different angle. Yeah. Is, but then it becomes a specific thing that you're doing, rather than the wandering anywhere. You're going back to a specific location. What would pull you back to a specific location?
The way I felt at the time. The first visit, I think if I felt a certain way, if I felt good, I want to go back there just because I want to feel good again. You know, it can be as simple as that. You know, I felt a certain way in a certain place. 'Cause, you know, the way you feel when you're photographing is very important, I suppose. You know, there's sometimes when I won't make I can walk around for a day and I won't make a photograph.
Yeah, so does that frustration really play games with you?
Yeah, it's accepting it. It's just accepting it, mate, and realizing that, and forgiving yourself as well. You know, you don't be too hard on yourself, mate. You know. There's days when you're a king. There's days when you're flat on your ass. You know, there's just that's the way it is. You know, that's the trade off. That's the trade off. You know, there's going to be days when you're a superstar, and other days when you're just rubbish. You know, but that's okay. You know, sometimes you don't need to take a photograph. Sometimes it's just nice, just wonderful and beautiful to be somewhere.
Yes.
Amazing, you know,
Yes.
and just appreciate it just for what it is. A photograph can, because everyone photographs now. Everyone's got the phones out all the time. You see so many people not looking at what's in front of them. You know, you go to see people taking photographs on the Mona Lisa and looking at it on the phone. You know, you know, or gigs. The ubiquitous sort of phones in the air at gigs. No one's looking at what's going on. Everyone's looking at the back of these screens now. So I think sometimes, you've got to just forgive yourself for not making images and enjoy being where you are. So
what about playing with this idea of digital and film? I mean, one intriguing thing that you've done of late is, and I remember with me, there used to be a pile of 35mm canisters on the shelf that I never got, that I never bothered to process. But you've experimented again, but you've come up with this idea of double exposing those films that you found, and some quite amazing results.
I was surprised, pleasantly surprised. Well, I mean, I'd had these films. I think there was 20 in all, 20 35mm canisters, you know, undeveloped but exposed, so all in the drawer. So I fashioned a device so I could get the leaders out again. You know, a bit of double-sided sticky tape and a bit of film. And I spent time sort of shoving them down into the sort of trying to pull the leaders out again. And I found them in a drawer there. There must have been 20, and I opened this drawer and they were glittering at me like, you know, some beautiful jewels. And I thought and I had an inkling what might be on a few of them, but it'd been so long I really didn't know. And it was like having a conversation with the possibility of having a conversation with my past self, a collaboration with my past self. Wow. And I really, really liked that idea. And that was an idea that sort of formulated in my head. You know, it wasn't, but you were very limited with what you could. I could have got them all processed, and it'd have been okay. But I wanted that connection with myself. You know, it was like being offered the opportunity to go back in time and talk to. However, I was 20 years old. You know. You know, what an opportunity. And I like the fact that there was a set number. I was only going to be able to do this for a set period of time. It had to be in that sort of frame of time. And I like that restriction. And my father gave me a 35mm compact point and shoot camera. It was I don't know, I can't remember the name. It was a Canon something doozy flop, I don't remember. But it had a big zoom on. Dads in the 90s liked to zoom, you know. They really did. It was so he had this huge, ludicrous zoom on it. But by the by, so I got that off him. But I like that connection as well, you know. I like that I like the way my father was somehow connected then. I was using his camera to re-expose these films, and I was able to go out. And I didn't try to think it through too much, because there was an element of serendipity involved. But then I started getting the films processed, and they started coming back, and some were colour, some were black and white, some were slide, tungsten balanced slide film. Wow. What the hell am I doing with this? But you know, so I had to when I scanned them and I put them in Photoshop, and I wanted them to be uniform, but I also wanted to destroy them in a way. I wanted to destroy that link. You know, because that was the point. I had this opportunity to talk to myself, then I wanted it done. I wanted it gone. Because I was a vastly different person, and as we all were, you know, when you're 20 years old. It seemed like a perfect opportunity to go and have a chat with myself. And I tried to imagine what I'd say to myself. And I tried to sort of, when I was walking, and I didn't really sort of think too much about what I was photographing. But then I started to get the films processed, and I started getting them back. And there were pictures of friends who died on there, superimposed with my son over them, you know, and they never met, and it was painful. It was very, very painful to do. very painful. But at the same time, it was beautiful as well. But it had to be that way. It had to be that way. But what I've done is I've kept one film, which I'm going to put in a drawer for another 20 years, and I'll go and photograph again in 20 years' time, so I can talk to myself. So when I'm what 60, I'll go and I'll redo it. So hopefully this camera's unless we're all on an island, something, fighting each other for those 3 molecules of water or something. Hopefully we'll all swim and I'll be able to do that. But that was the basic premise behind it.
Right. Okay. This isn't the first time you've done double exposure.
That's right.
Expand.
Yeah. I have a friend in America, a photographer called Jackie Golding. She's known online as JM Golding. Strangely, I'm meeting her next weekend. She's come over to my house. So we've never met, obviously. But you like all these things, you build up a rapport and a relationship. And I know she was doing double exposures using a camera called a Holga, which is a medium format plastic, near as much makes no difference, point and shoot, I suppose, with a plastic lens. And I always quite liked that aspect. It was no technology at all. There was something really, really sort of quite pleasing about it. It took a lot of problems out the window and gave you a load of different ones. And and we started. We decided, we chatted about it and said, oh, let's do a roll. So the premise was, I shoot a roll in my Holga, she shoots a roll in her Holga. She's in California, I'm in the Peak District, and then we rewound the rolls, put them in the loving, caring arms of the British Postal Service and US Postal Service, and they'd fly over the sea. We'd get each other's roll and then re-expose them. Simple as that. It's very easy to do. And we called what did we call it? I don't remember. I can't remember the name of the blooming project now.
Tales.
Bingo, that's it. That's all I needed. Yeah, Tales from a Non-Existent Land. And it was a start. I was surprised. I was consistently surprised how well they turned out. How these 2 totally different people from totally different parts of the world. And there was just something lovely as well about receiving a film, something tangible, so like someone that you knew she'd handle it. So when I went out walking, I tried to imagine her with me. I tried to imagine this lady I've never met, this sort of 50-year-old, sort of hippie-ish looking woman that that I'd never met, and I tried to imagine her walking with me and what we'd photographed together. And we created this totally different world, this non-existent land. And it was lovely. It was such a breath of fresh air. It was such a wonderful thing to be part of. It wasn't serious. There was no agenda to it. It was just shooting for the sheer pleasure of shooting and making a connection with someone that's no closer than a stranger to me. Making that connection and being understood by someone else. So we kept at it, and I think we've done maybe 5 rolls over about 5 years or something like that. So it's not every, obviously, it's a once in a blue moon event. And believe me, they don't always work. We cherry pick, because some are absolutely rubbish, but a lot of them work amazingly well. I'm very surprised. I mean, we even entered some into some competitions in the States, and they were very well received and exhibited in somewhere in Texas or something. I don't remember, but I was always really surprised.
Well, it's that wabi-sabi thing, isn't it? It's perfection in the imperfection.
Yeah.
And that's, I guess, what a Holga camera gives you.
Oh, they're awful things. They're terrible things to use. They're rubbish. I mean, the optics are awful. But they give you a dreamy. There's a vignette to them, and the light leaks are tremendous things. You go out with it, you just never know what you're going to get, and I love that. I absolutely adore that sensation of it could all go wrong, and it doesn't matter if it goes wrong. It just doesn't matter. Wonderful things they are. I highly recommend everyone getting one. They've stopped making them now, so like gold dust, but bag one while you can.
It's like the Polaroids as well, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, of either medium, which do you prefer to work in, digital or film?
Either or, not bothered at all.
Right.
They don't. I don't even think about it really. It's just I've got a digital camera and I've got film cameras. My favourite cameras to use are pinholes. I make Solargraphs.
Yes. Which are amazing things.
Oh, thank you very much.
I love them to bits. What can do you use?
Whatever particular alcoholic binge I've been on that week. It just depends. It really does depend. I find any Guinness can, that sort of size can. Yes. Anything, and it's such a fantastic excuse to go and buy a 4-pack. I'm creating, damn it, I'm creating. And so they're simple enough, very simple things to make. It's just a piece of 5x7 darkroom paper and a pinhole. Yeah. And all you have to do is go and walk out somewhere where no one's going to be, because people are devils for it. People are curious about them. So I've had quite a few
nicked, have you?
Either stolen or cut open or torn apart, because these human beings are curious little scamps at the best of times, are they not? And I don't know what they expect to find in there, but I've started sort of thinking I'll tape sort of biohazard warnings on them or something, and so hopefully people will leave them alone. But to be fair, this recent batch, I tend to do it in between projects, because it's such a wonderful thing to bridge that gap, that low bit when after you've made something, you've finished, and you find yourself twiddling your thumbs, what the hell am I going to do with myself? And I find it really, really quite a soothing thing to go and do, and also the time aspect, because these things you can leave them for as long as you want, years. In fact, there's ones I've lost. I've got no idea where they are, and they're still out there somewhere gathering light. I'd love to find them again, but I did so many at first and I never wrote them down, so I tend to write a list now, very ambiguous list, so like uphill near dead sheep or something like that. So it's still that I still might forget, but I like photographers should be obsessed with time. Yes. I know you're very obsessed with time, especially as I get older. Especially as I get older, and you realise that it's running out quickly. Yeah. And I love the fact that when I leave one, when I come back, it's a different person picking up. That enough time has elapsed for it to be a different person picking it up. And I sort of, again, it's like a conversation with my past self, a little bit like the based on a false story. I like to come back, and okay, only 2 months has elapsed, but it's enough time for a great many things to have happened in your life, a great many things to happen in the world. So it's all sort of compressed down onto this sort of little 5x7 piece of paper. I mean, I lost a friend a few weeks ago, and the Solargraphs are put up before he died, and then I go and collect them, the same ones, after he died, and I look at the prints, the pictures, and I know in there somewhere, I look at them and I know in there somewhere the point where he stopped breathing, and I know that's perhaps a maudling way to look at them, but you can't, whatever's gone on in your life, you kind of look at these things and go, it's all in there, that all happened then. But aside from the fact, I suppose you're looking at a photograph the way perhaps a tree would experience time if it could. That slowing. I'm in there somewhere. There's the port. There's me walking away from it. There's me coming back to pick it up. It's all in there. Okay, you just can't see it, but it's all in there, and you just have to kind of sort of think of it that way, I suppose, and apply it to that.
So your body and soul, is a camera, really.
I guess, if you like, yeah. Of course it is, yeah. Oh, every blink. Every blink. Yeah. I mean, the Solargraphs are. I like leaving them. I like walking away from them and forgetting about them for a while. And I love the fact that little photographic seeds are just planted. Creative littering, I suppose it is. Because you're sort of taping them up, and I tape them up anything I can. It's got gaffer tape and. Cable ties. It looks so dodgy when I go in a shop and I want gaffer tape and cable ties, and and I've got a craft knife in my bag. It looks so sinister. God knows what they must think. But so I need all this stuff so I can you try to explain. I need these for pinholes. Not for murders. I need them for pinholes. But I love leaving them.
We've talked about the process of making Solargraphs. What is the image you end up with, Al?
The image. The image is literally, basically it's a negative. You've got a negative image, and you do have to digitalise it, or you don't have to. You're not developing anything. You're doing this. It's black and white darkroom paper. So you can get it out fairly quickly and stick it on a scanner. You scan it in, and it's when you invert it, and it becomes a positive again. So that's when it becomes, it becomes that wonderful blue colour.
Yes.
And that's when you see, what you really, but then you have to spin it around and you can flip it how you want, and you just tweak a few levels. Very, very sort of simple. I've only ever printed one out for a friend. And a friend asked me. I've never thought about printing them, but you're limited because you can only, they're only small, and you can only, and you've got to be quick with the scan. You can't do a long scan because there's light obviously hitting light sensitive paper, so it has to be a very quick scan, so you can only scan them at something like 600 dpi at the original size, so they can't really be blown up immense. Or they could do, but the degradation may be an issue.
But the size really is their joy in a way.
Of course it is. Yeah, you've got a beautiful little, it's the whole world compressed into a 5x7 piece of paper. Everything that happened in that time is there in there, if you think about it that way. Or it's just a photograph of some trees in the sun. But it depends how deeply you want to sort of think about it. I like the best one I ever made. I'd left it in a tree for I think around a month, and some crow I suppose had come and pecked a hole in the top. But and it let all the water and leaves and animal and bugs and weather had got into, and of course a lot of light. And that was my favourite one I'd ever done. I loved the thought of being helped by animals and nature, and everything sort of got it. I might, I almost thought about sticking birdseed on the top of each one, just so things could come along and peck at them and help me in some way. But it made such a bizarre photograph, and it's the only time it's ever happened, but it's the best one I ever did. The best one. It made so much sense. All these, while I'm gone, it's been tampered with by nature. I love that. You are literally, I mean, you're composing a photograph. You are composing a photograph as best you can, and you can imagine what it might look like, but you've got no real idea. No real idea at all. But that's part of the charm. I think as you get, it's slowly you get more experienced. You begin to get a rough idea of what it might look like. I've started pointing them upwards, because you get so much more. They look so much more abstract. I think the last one I did was it's the best one ever, and it was one that I'd pointed upwards. So I'm going to start doing that rather than take them to a tree pointing outwards. I like that a lot of water seems to get into them as well, so and they'll create a sort of bizarre sort of speckled effect, almost like a universe, which is what it is essentially, sort of infinity. But yeah, it's totally a totally pure landscape. I'm doing nothing. I'm just putting it up and leaving it and letting it happen. I'm just letting it happen, and forever, however long I'm going to leave it. That's all it is. All it is.
Scarred landscapes are an important feature of your work. I was looking at one just now. There's a lovely picture of a pool, but there are iron driven into the ground in front of the pool.
Yeah.
And so, what's the importance of that sort of darkness and that sort of juxtaposition of man and?
I think it's something within me. The non-places was a reaction, I suppose, to something very personal that was going on in my life at the time. I was having a very, very sort of bad time mentally. I was very depressed, and I think the non-places, rather than, the only way I can express myself is through photography. I couldn't not photograph any more than than breathe in and out. So it was about going out and in that sort of frame of mind, you're drawn to these places, these out of the way places. You don't want to meet anybody, and you just sort of found yourself there, and they match up to how I was feeling at the time. But it got better. Obviously, I started to get better and better, and the project evolved along with it. But I was almost, this is a strange thing, I was almost worried about getting better in case I couldn't make the photographs anymore. That was a ludicrous thing, but it's how I felt. I was so frightened about getting better in case I couldn't make these images.
Oh, no, I can relate to that feeling.
It was really strange. It was really strange. So it probably took me a lot longer to get well, because it was a very, very bad time. But I think it was very difficult to talk about originally, and I almost regret maybe mentioning how, or revealing how bad I'd got, At the, you know, it was. I was very scared about doing that. Very, very nervous about revealing, because it's such a taboo subject. But like I said, it wouldn't. It was about that initially, you know, and it was about going to these places, because I knew more or less no one would be there.
So were you using it as a therapy, really?
It must have been, well. It wasn't knowingly. There was nothing cathartic about it. It was just a necessity. Like, if I'd been well, I'd have still gone and. But you know, I didn't want to. I think if you say to someone, I'm just off photographing, no one bats an eyelid. Oh, right, okay, no problem. It gave me an excuse to be away from people, and an excuse to be somewhere strange that matched the way I was feeling. And I just decided the best thing I could do is photograph every single place that I felt, and where I felt that, you know, in that particular way. And they just happened to be sort of dark places. But I mean, like I said, that's what that project was about initially. But it's also about recovery and about regaining your sort of yourself, you know, finding yourself again after a pretty tough time, I have to admit. Yeah, very strange sort of period of my life. But you know, it's out there now, and people don't understand the reasoning behind it, and people are very, you know, thankfully very kind, you know. But it was the hardest thing I've probably ever done in my life, is putting this body of work out, and then really sort of admitting to people why I'd done it. You know, Rob Hudson was, and a lot of other people were very, very kind to me. And I emailed Rob first and said, look, you know, I'm really unsure about this. Can you just give me a little bit of advice, maybe, and put me in the right direction? Rob was very encouraging and very, very kind to me. I mean, I'll never forget what he did, and he gave me the strength, I suppose, just to admit. And it was important to admit as well. It was never about a cry for help, and it was never about depression. There's people out there doing better jobs, bringing depression and mental illness into the line, you know, into the I suppose making people aware of it, and they're doing a much better job than I could ever do. No, that wasn't what it was about. It was my own reaction, to my own problems, and you know, but luckily here I am. You know, I got better, and I survived. You know, I made my way through. You know, there might be another time, you know, where I go downhill. You know, we're all susceptible to it. You know, I was always amazed how quickly it becomes apparent that you're not very well, but you learn to look out for the sort of the warning signs, and you can do something about it now. I mean, you know, but with photography, I'm not going to say it saved my life, because that's not true, but it was a way of working it out, just working it out. The landscapes themselves, the scarred, the barren, the desolate. You know, of course I'm going to go and photograph stuff like that. You know, of course I'm going to be in these places. You know, that's where I wanted to be. Didn't want to see other people, you know. And I also didn't want other people, you know, coming up talking to me. I'm out here doing this.
Yeah, it was very funny. I was walking about 7 months ago on the Preseli Mountains, and there were people on the mountain. It was really bugged me off that there were people on the mountain.
How dare you? How dare you come here? Yeah. Walk in this beautiful place. Yeah. You know, people ruin it. People ruin the landscape. But I mean, you can't in the Peak District. You can't move for tripod. People sharpening the tripods, and you know the rustle of man-made fibres as the sort of like anoraks and waterproof trousers. They sort of move about. It's just, but I don't go and photograph in those places anymore. You know, if you see a line of guys with tripods, turn around and walk away.
Yes.
Just turn around and walk away. I mean, if they do that, that's up to them. But I don't want to see another sunset. No. You know, as long as I don't care. I'm not bothered. If that makes you happy, do whatever you want to do. But just don't expect me to be interested. That sounds so bad tempered, but it's true. It's true. You know, I'm not interested.
I'm with you 100%.
A lot of the places were being recolonised by trees. You know, trees are always and plant life. It seems to come back. So there was always that hope. Always that hope. It wasn't despair. There was always you'd see the landscape sort of like mending itself, and that was the metaphor. That's what I was trying to get across in these places. Also, it's, you know, sometimes it was amazing fun to be in these bonkers places. You know, the industry. And again, it's the people, you know, the people in the landscape, you know, that created these places that you sort of try and make that connection with. And it was the whole project was about hope. You know, it wasn't a dark project. It was about hope. It was for me personally, but I don't think the work is. I mean, I suppose young photographers are pressured, I suppose, to show work in a certain way. And I'm not claiming I'm the most original person in the world by any means, or the most original photographer, but I just do what feels right. And like I said before, if the world's ready for that work, then it's going to be ready for that work.
Right, you've talked a lot about the emotional side and the psychological side and the mental. So is it all about love, really?
I think it's, well, look, yeah, I get it. Well, that's a tricksy one. I love what I do. I love being able to do it. But I suppose everything it comes back for that. It comes back to love, I guess. You know, that love for the world I live in, or the love for being able to just walk. And I sort of think, because I suppose I talk to a lot of people, and they kind of waiting to retire. You know, and I always found that quite a peculiar thing. So I'm waiting till I'm 65, and then I can retire, and then I can really start living. You know, when you best of the world, your best years are, well, maybe not. I know some good years are over, and I feel like I'm in a very privileged position, and I just try not to lose sight of that. You know, but so it's just a love for the ability and the opportunity to do this.
Yes.
Not everyone can do it, you know. Not everyone's got, you know. I'm just very, very lucky, very, very lucky person to be able to go and do it. Just remembering that, and also, you know, I like the photographic community. Right, you know, you start to meet people. People start to engage with you, and you start to find people who think the same way as you do. Because again, coming back down to being understood, you know, we all want to be understood by people. And it should be it's got such potential to be a beautiful community of people, and I think it is. It seems to be and considering it's such an insular profession, you know, I'm on my own 90% of the time. So these moments of human contact are wonderful, you know, wonderful for me, because it is solitary. But I wouldn't have it any other way, really. I like that.
I've always been a believer in, because I like photographing people. People is
right.
My kind of world, really. I enjoy that. I enjoy the interaction I get with them, because I was speaking to a man. I was on an assignment, actually, and I was speaking, and somebody arrived where I was doing the assignment, and I thought he was an interesting character, so I started talking to him. He gave me a cucumber, which he was in his 80s.
Like you do, yeah.
He was a really nice farmer, you know,
yeah.
And I photographed him, and but that little world that was created at that specific time is kind of locked in my head forever.
Yeah.
And sometimes I wish I could give that. The photograph doesn't really. It says something, but it doesn't say everything.
No, of course not,
about that moment.
No, it can't do, can it?
Did you find that frustrating, though? You know, that you will have been, let's say, to one of your quarries, or you've gone down a road and you've seen this. There's one shot with trees that you've shown recently, which is absolutely magnificent. It's a beautiful photograph.
Thank you. I don't remember it.
But I'll show it to you after.
Okay.
but it's a beautiful photograph. But that moment, because it doesn't convey everything. Now, a painter can convey things on canvas that can elicit a great deal of emotion.
Surely, yeah.
A photograph doesn't do quite the same thing.
No, it's just a copy. It's just a copy
Yeah.
of. That's all it is. It's a representation.
So, in that respect, does it fail?
No, not at all. I think it depends. It depends what the viewer does with it, I suppose. You know, at the end of the day, I was there, and that's all that matters to me.
Right.
That's all that matters to me. I was there, and I saw this, whatever it was, and it meant enough to me to make a picture. But it is, when you really just get down to it, it's just a copy, you know. But people will disagree with that and say, well, they mean so much more. But that's how the other person, the viewer, perceives it. It's up to them to make their own minds up about it. I've done my job. It's up to you now. I've done this. Brilliant. You have to do this. It's not.
So it's and that's difficult in this day and age because we're so inundated by imagery.
Yeah, of course,
it's coming at us from every perceivable angle that people, because you notice it when people look at books, especially photographic books, they tend to flick, and they never stay. They never hold and really look about what's happening. You watch people in galleries looking at photographs. It tends to be very skimmy, their approach.
Yeah. Well, I think people are nervous of galleries. People are nervous of things that they don't necessarily. I think people are worried about looking stupid. They don't want to look silly. They don't want to ask questions. Right. If in a gallery situation,
is that something specifically British? Or would you find
I think that's just humankind, to be fair.
Okay.
People don't want to... I don't think it's about the answer. I think it's about enjoying the question. Okay. I always think, it doesn't... You don't necessarily need to work it out, but enjoy the question. Simple as that, really, isn't it? It doesn't... You don't have to come to a conclusion about it. There isn't a golden magic rule. And when someone says, well, why don't you explain your work? And someone says, no, it's up to you. It's up to you now. It's up to the viewer. But I mean, photography and art can be quite po-faced, I suppose, and and galleries, I guess, can be quite intimidating places, especially if you think you're not supposed to understand it. I'm not supposed to understand this. But it's all there. It's all there, and it's up to you. And it doesn't matter if you get it right or wrong. There isn't a right or wrong. You've only got yourself and what's in your head to bear upon it. You can't do anything else. There's no right or wrong.
No, that's so true. However, we all, I guess, as photographers, are looking for some sort of recognition of our work. Do you look for recognition, or don't you? Are you not?
Oh, Christ, I want to be famous. No, no. I don't know. I like interacting. I like the interaction it brings. If someone engages with your work, whether it be negatively or positively, occasionally it's nice to see. I've a while ago, maybe a few years ago, I saw myself getting slagged off in real time on a blog, and people really weren't holding back. I really wanted to jump in and have a sort of try and defend myself, but I didn't at the end of the day. I kind of enjoyed watching how other people perceived it, and it was a series of work, except they'd taken one photograph completely out of context. Right. And the typical usual, I don't understand this. It's rubbish, load of rubbish. I found it fascinating to watch people in real time. That was quite interesting as well. So I sort of sat there and tried not to be hurt by it, But then I thought the strangers, and if they'd met me, and I'd maybe had a chance to explain, not that I would, but if I'd had a chance, then maybe they'd have got something from it. It was only their limitations, their own limitations. And I'm sure in their everyday lives, they might just be a little bit closed-minded or a bit frightened. A bit frightened maybe. A lot of people are scared. Aren't they? But recognition, it's gonna. If the world's ready for your work, it's ready for your work. And 100 years time, it might happen. I don't know. It doesn't. But it probably doesn't matter.
Right. Do you make plans for the future with your work? I mean, because we are dependent these days on having stuff on hard drives and what have you, and how will you pass it all on?
From an archival point of view.
Yes.
Well, that's an interesting question. I think it'd be interesting to see how the digital media sort of holds up. Will it still be available? Well, I've got a DVD with some raw files on. Will that still be usable in 100 years' time? I don't know. I think negatives. I've got negatives are another way of looking at it. They're probably, if you keep them correctly or keep them right, they're going to last an awful long time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I make a lot of copies of things, and I have drop boxes and other cloud stuff. I get so befuddled with it, and so I just upload as much as I can, as long as it's somewhere. And even if it was all destroyed in a fire, I just start again. It's
really,
yeah, of course, yeah.
Really,
yeah, definitely, yeah. I'd be gutted. Don't get me wrong, But people ask, what would you take out if your house burnt down? What was the first thing you take out? And it wouldn't be my photographs, you save yourself. I'd quite happily let them burn. I'm only saying that. I probably wouldn't. I'd probably be so bummed out when I got outside. Oh no! Why didn't I just grab that hard drive? I wouldn't. Obviously, I'd try and say them, but stuff like I'm not so fussed if it's forgotten about and completely forgotten. It doesn't matter. I've done it now. I'm doing it now. It's about. I'm enjoying my time here, and expressing myself now, and that's the important thing. Someone gets something from it in 100 years' time, brilliant. But I'll be dead. I won't care. It doesn't matter.
That leads on quite nicely. Another bit on your website is the last photograph you will take. Now, I've told my kids that if I'm bound to a wheelchair and dribbling, but I can actually, I've told them to make a rig on it so I can have a camera, so I can press the shutter. So
the last photograph you ever made, well, there will be one.
There will be one.
Yes. The last, it could be anything. The last cigarette I ever smoked, the last cup of tea I ever have. The list goes on. And there will be a last photograph I ever make. But I'm so curious as to what it'll be. It'll probably be an absolute pile of rubbish, but it might be the best one I've ever taken. It might be that I knowingly make the last photograph I ever make. I think, right, that's it. I've done. Yeah. Hopefully not. I can't see that happening personally, but you never know, do you?
It's really funny because both my parents are very elderly. My father's 96, my mum's 90. I have photographed him, but I don't think very well.
Right.
And I tend to avoid rather than photograph.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes a lot of guts, I think, to photograph something that's passing away.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And it's kind of the same thing with landscape as well. There's a piece of land, which is a rough piece of land near where I lived, near Llantrisant, which is down the road from here. And there were developers coming in, and it was going to be taken away, basically. And I went to photograph there, and I passed it today.
Right.
And I saw the disintegration and the tarmac and the big bulldozers, etc. in there. And it kind of, because those photographs, nobody else would have bothered to photograph those areas. And that sort of kind of destruction of, and I know you can't stop it.
No.
And you can't make it go away. It's happened. And I was wondering, are there places that you photograph now that have disappeared, gone away?
Yeah, well, everything's in a state of flux. Flux as it is, I suppose. I mean, I suppose the most recent thing, or the thing that I see most often would probably be if trees have been cut down, if a forest, because there's so many sort of fir tree plantations up where I live. Suddenly you'll go up to the same spot and it'll be a completely different place.
Right.
Very eerie, very strange when you see a place that was covered by trees, and then literally a day later, it looks like a wasteland. But I like that. I don't mind. I don't mind that at all.
No, because there is beauty in the detail of what's happened as well.
You can put as many wind farms that we like, put as many motorways. It doesn't that Okay, you're getting into a different sort of ecological issue, but I like that evolution of landscape. Things have to decay and things have to be pulled down, and I can understand the nostalgia, especially if it's somewhere, perhaps when you played when you were a child, and you go and visit your old school and it's no longer there. I understand that. It's
but revisiting those places as a child, it's really strange you to say that, because I photographed. There's a cromlech in Pembrokeshire called Pentre Ifan, which is a very famous cromlech. It's beautiful, and I photographed that as a child with an Instamatic camera, and I went back, and what I thought was huge. It's kind of
a lot smaller than it used to be.
Smaller than it used to be.
Like Mars bars,
It's it's funny how things, and I photograph from exactly the same spot.
Oh, that's fascinating. That's interesting.
And that's an interesting thing to do as well. And I've been revisiting lots of places that I used to play as a child.
Yeah.
And I did some pinhole stuff actually, because I used to. There was a small hill really overlooking the sea, and I used to go there as a 5, 6 year old child on my own.
Yeah.
Bizarrely, but not really. Sitting in places where I knew I sat.
Yeah. Very
and
strange.
taking pinholes, because they give you that ethereal look, and
Yeah.
they give you that sort of dream.
Of course, yeah,
thing.
yeah. Well, I can understand you trying. I mean, perfectly understand, because if you're lucky, if you've had a nice childhood, that's when you felt the safest. So it's natural as an adult, you want to recreate that feeling of happiness, that safeness. But I suppose with the I don't know, children see everything and nothing, and as a adult you start to lose that. So I completely understand trying to go back and recapture that childlike, looking at everything with a sense of wonder. I've got a 3-year-old boy, and I bought him a digital camera for Christmas.
Right.
You know, and at the end of each day I was absolutely fascinated by what he'd taken. I'd grabbed the camera off him, he'd gone to bed, and I'd look through his pictures of what he thought was important, and some of the things he'd like to see everything in everything and nothing. And I love that childlike wonder of the world. I suppose, as you get older, you do lose it. There's no getting around it, you do. But I suppose you're always trying to get it back, or remembering it. But I completely understand what you mean about, because there's something nice about, there's places in the Peak District. I went with my father when I was a little boy. I was chatting about it last night, oddly, but there was a bridge. And as I remember, there was a sheep's head underneath the bridge. I remember prodding it with a stick, like you do, like children want to do. But I'd found this bridge again. I didn't realise it was the same bridge, and I stood there for perhaps 15 minutes or so. And I didn't know why. I wasn't moving. I just didn't want to move from the spot. And I slowly began to dawn on me, this was that bridge that I spent time with my father at. And, my brain was sort of screaming at me that this was, but I wasn't listening to it. I wasn't listening. But I realised after like 15 minutes or so, I realised why I just couldn't seem to move away from there. I thought, this is that bridge. And instantly I was transported back. Those memories sort of filled through. I mean, smell's an evocative memory jigger, isn't it?
Oh yeah, tar is a big thing in my mind, because they used to tar
tar.
the road, and they used to throw chippings all over it, but they'd kind of melt into this tar.
Wonderful smell.
And singing telegraph wires as well. Do you know what I mean? They really are evocative to me.
Creosote, pine needles. I mean, you're always looking back to you. If it was a happy one, I'm blessed with a happy childhood, thankfully, and again, you're sort of lucky in that way. But I do like the thought of zipping back occasionally and just trying to sort of connect with you. I think you have to, with photography, it has to be playful as well. Yeah. You have to play, and because that's with play, that's how you learn. That's how you I think as adults you forget how to play. But having a child forces you to start to learn to play again. I was amazed how difficult I found it at first, is learning how to play again. I mean, and then before you're playing Hulk and Spider-Man Go Shopping or something, and you're quite happy to do it, and it's the strangest thing in the world, but you're quite happy to do it. But I like that. I think it's very interesting that you went back to them places and imagine that connection with your past, sitting in the same place again. Yeah,
because I think a lot of things are very circular. Our lives are very circular, and we keep on returning,
of course,
to places. And on that kind of theme, then, are you a spiritual person?
I don't like. I'm not a fan of that word. I don't. I think it's tricky one to answer that one. I'm not religious in any way, I suppose I think as deeply as the next man about the world, maybe more. I don't know. I don't know. It's like those late night conversations you suddenly had with people when you've had enough beer to kill a rhino. You end up in these sort of bizarre diatribes with people about. I've had a few this weekend. It's been very, very odd. But I can't claim to be a spiritual person. But it depends what you mean by that. It's a strange.
Well, it's like being able to, when you're out in the landscape. Because the search, I suppose, for me, from my point of view, is searching for that essence.
The connection, I suppose.
And that connection.
Yeah. In that sense, I suppose. We're part of it. We're part of it. We're part of the the world and the universe. The world's round. It's a round place. People often seem to forget that. But getting back to that, you want that connection with the place. There's certain places you do feel a connection with, especially like you said with the childhood things.
Yes.
There's that very, very deep connection with it. That bridge, I'll always remember that bridge. And I'll always go back there. And I'll always think of my father. I'll always think of that day.
Yeah.
And there's load. It's like going back to your hometown after years away.
Because I found a place where I used to go as a child, and I used to stay in this farmhouse, which is quite a large farm and a very large farmhouse. When I went back, it's now actually falling to bits. It's part of a larger farm, and they've not bothered with with anything there.
Yeah.
So all the roof is caving in, and there's general destruction and change, I suppose.
Yeah.
And so, and I was approaching it as a 63-year-old man. And when you approach things like that, and you start to see things like that, and things starting to fall apart, the equation and that mirror of yourself becomes really, it's really pronounced and really focused.
Yeah.
It's almost, it becomes a very emotional experience.
Of course, yeah.
And so photographing that kind of stuff, it would probably mean nothing to anybody else other than it's just another farm building falling down.
Yeah, it depends. I think the people, if you're looking, if you're interested in that sort of thing, if I see an old, there's an old building I happened upon fairly recently, an old farmhouse as it happens, and that was just from wandering, just one of my aimless wanders, and I came across this old farmhouse, and it just so happened a few times after that I'd revisited it because I found it such a beautiful, quiet place to be. I never saw anyone there, and one day I saw a chap there, sort of in his maybe sort of 60s, 70s, I don't know. We both sort of looked at each other and said, "What are you doing here?" We both obviously go there to be alone. And but after a typical northern man standoff, where it would sort of begrudgingly sort of edged nearer to each other and eventually got talking. And he was a wealth of knowledge about the place. He made it sing for me. This entire building became something totally different because he knew the people. He had a detailed history about the people who lived there. This was a farm where it was near a flooded valley. People had made the valley was flooded. Maybe I can't remember 120 years ago. And all the farms were subsequently dismantled and moved away. But this one was still there because there was no road up to it. So this building was still here. And it had been a farm there in the 16th century. So you kind of walk around. I knew it was old, but I had no idea that, And so you're walking around and you're just trying to imagine the people who worked there, what sort of lives they had, the memories. And I truly believe, it was like sitting there and trying to listen to ghosts. You just, like I said before, the dead sing songs, and you're trying to learn to listen. So you sort of sit there and you imagine the people and try and make that connection. Okay, the long dead, you're never going to really know them, but they were there. And so you kind of have to make it up in your head and try and imagine what these people were like and imagine that connection. And I want that connection with people, living or dead. It's important. But the only thing that's left are these sort of shelves of buildings. So you just have to sit there and absorb the. But it was very interesting to meet someone who knew something about it, and just a half an hour conversation with him changed this place dramatically. It turns out he lives up the road from me, like as you do. Of course you.
Did you photograph him?
No, I only had. That's the down. I only had. I'd gone up to do some Solargraphs. I was going to try and put some Solargraphs up around the place, but I never did. It just didn't work. It wasn't the right place to do it, so I didn't. I didn't photograph him. No, but I did. I just enjoyed talking to him. It was just beautiful to talk to someone. And then he was telling me he brought his grandson up there. And I like that. I really, really like the fact he brought his grandson up there, his 14-year-old grandson, and they made fires and they sat there and they enjoyed the place together. It was so important. And he experienced it in a completely different way than I would. He had that connection with his grandson. And his grandson, when he goes back there, he might take his own grandchildren there, and it'll continue. That story will continue. And I love that. That's continuation. So there's always hope. There's always hope. The next generation will find it. The next generation of people will go and do something. The future looks sort of dark at the moment, doesn't it? But it's where the next generation are going to, I suppose, take the light, as it were. Yeah. So that when you see a crumbling building, okay, it's crumbled and the people are dead, but people are going to enjoy it in different ways, you know. So there's always hope. There's always hope. It continues. It just continues, and it's comforting to know that as well, isn't it?
I have to concur with your philosophy. It's absolute joy listening to you speak about. It's not photography, really, is it?
It's a way of it's a way of life. You just happen to have a camera with you,
That's right.
I suppose. You know, it's a way. It's a device that I can make sense of the world with. You know, I suppose in a way.
Yeah.
I suppose. I mean, it might be something else. You know, it's easier than carting around a paintbrush and easel, isn't it? You know, much easier. less of a hassle.
You've talked about that. I would agree with you that all photographers are very insular, and we are very sort of in our little bubble.
Of course, yeah.
But you've recently started a collective.
We have.
And with what purpose?
I suppose the four of us involved. I suspect we just never really found we fit in anywhere. And I think if you want to do something, no one's going to do it for you. You know, we're not in any club, so we kind of have to make our own. It's quite petulant, really, I suppose. You know, you're not going to be in our, you know, no, you can't be in our club. But so we'll make our own club. You know, make our own little group. But we all have similar ideas about the way landscape photography, specifically landscape photography, can be used to tell stories, to mean something more than photographing the weather. You know, a lot of people seem to photograph the weather, which is fine if you want to do that. But I'm just, you know, Rob and Steve and Joe and I, the four people involved, aren't particularly interested in that. We want it to be something different, and I like the thought of a collective. It gives you some support and a little bit of critique and some feedback about work. But we want to include. It wants to be an open tent. You know, it doesn't want to be po-faced. It wants to be open and inviting. You know, it should be a beautiful thing. It should be about community and about love and about respect, and making a community of photographers. You know, male, female. It doesn't matter, you know. We want your work. We want to see your work. Send us your work. You know, show us what you're interested in. Make it sing for us. You know.
Right. And if people are looking for this collective, what's it called?
It's called Inside the Outside.
Look it out on Twitter, guys.
Look it on Twitter. Look at it. You know, the catchy title was hammered out in a pub in London after many beers. So. Just have a look at the work. Have a look at the work on the site, and we start to ask certain people. You know, next month we have a photographer called Jackie Booth, who's going to show us some of her work. She's the first person, aside from the four of us, to show work on the site. So we're really looking forward to that. So she's done some writing, some photos. So you know, I'll be tweeting that, and there's the Facebook page. So yeah, see the links.
Thank you very much, Al.
It's been an absolute pleasure. No, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Excellent.